if you think about it, in the United Kingdom, in the United States, and in China, the working class people have all had the same situation. Their political leadership fucked them, right? And Lao Beijing's probably the worst because they have the least freedom. They played the game according to the rules that were set. And the rules that were set is husband your resources, right? Save for a rainy day. And what you want to do, because they tell us this in the West, is to get a real asset, to buy real estate, to actually have, it's not going to be a white picket fence, but it's going to be an apartment in a building, right? And you do that, and its price is going to go up, and you can sell it later and make more money, put some away, buy a bigger place. What's happened is because of the phony financing of the construction and the banking industry, because the CCP guys, the factions run it, were skimming it off the top. Okay, this is one of the things in the 2019 deal was supposed to stop the corruption of them lifting off state-owned industries 20%. This is how the Chinese Communist Party finances itself, is the grift it takes off of the state-owned industries. It was the banking and the construction that was the biggest. They grifted off it. The little guy in China, Lao Beijing, old 100 names, paid for this, and now they're sitting there with all that hard work and all those years with a real asset that's 50% less, and a mortgage is still a ticking time bomb. China has some massive problems. 2 years ago, they put tanks in front of the Bank of China because people would come. You've seen those riots in the lobbies when people come and say, hey, I want my money back from my bank. And the Chinese officials go, well, you got to come back on Monday. Come back next week and we'll talk to you.
So with that in mind, can we gameplay from the CCP point of view what they can do next? It seems that one thing that they seem to be trying to do, which makes sense, is broker deals with other trading blocs, like they're talking to the EU. And so I think they've got the gross export to the US is something like 500 million, something like
500 billion.
500 billion.
Net, I don't think it's the gross. I actually think it's the net 600. But hang on for a second. You make a brilliant point. And let me connect some dots here. So a huge headline the other day is by the president of the EU, and she makes. I just talked about the East Asian companies. In fact, there's a Financial Times. I can give you the detail if you just hang on. Not that one. It's one I always keep near the top, right there. Here we go. Okay. Financial Times of London, which, by the way, is the most important paper in the world and a paper I recommend. It's the globalist rag, so you got to read this.
I'm glad you give that caveat at the end.
You can't understand. You can't understand the world. One of the powers of the show is we walk people through what the Financial Times says. The Financial Times of London and The Economist are the two things you have to read on a weekly basis. You will understand the world from the globalist perspective. So now, what do they say? Beijing warns of retaliation against nations doing U.S. deals. Okay? And the Chinese try to be subtle. They're not subtle. I go back to what Besson's doing. Japan, Korea, the Philippines, Taiwan, Vietnam, and India. That's the East Asian kind of block. We're doing deals that part of those deals are, hey, you're part of our block and we have rules of the game, etc. You're not part of their block. The CCP saw that and go, yo, if you do that, you're going to have a problem. And we're here, and the foreign devils, we'll see how long they're here. It's a huge effort. In the middle of this, because all the deals are going to have that, the EU, there's a huge headline in the British papers and the internet and the European papers. Van der Leyen says, in their negotiation, there will be no decoupling. Anything the EU does with America, adamant, there'll be no decoupling from China. So I go, interesting. That's one of the biggest trading blocks in the world, and they were up in our grow right away. And I sat there and I go, that's interesting. I said, as Van der Leyen says that, because you don't see Japan coming out and saying no decoupling. You don't see South Korea coming out and saying no decoupling. You know, I'm not saying those negotiations are going to be perfect at the end, but you don't see any of these other partners who know what the stakes are, and particularly India coming out and saying no decoupling, right? They may not want to get in Beijing's face, but they understand.
The Indians are now putting a trade tariff on the Chinese.
Exactly. The Indians are really, hey,
they get it.
And not just that, we love decoupling. Decouple more because Apple will come here. The Europeans are adamant and actually public about one of the key conditions precedent to the deal, no decoupling. And I go, isn't that interesting? We have 2 carrier battle groups in the Red Sea to keep the sea lanes open for the Suez Canal for trading into Europe. In that 2 carrier battle groups, we have 24,000 American sailors. We just lost an I think 16 the other day rolled off the carrier deck. We're getting hit by the Houthis all the time. We're keeping the Red Sea open from the Houthis so from the Persian Gulf and from China, the goods and oil and gas to fuel Europe, or Europe would shut down if the Suez Canal was closed, or their prices would go up 20% if you had to go around Africa. And in that entire operation, we have one British destroyer from the Royal Navy, we have one French corvette, and we have one Italian frigate. It's to van der Leyen and EU, go fuck yourself. We're keeping Europe so inflation won't explode. And this is what, when people talk about NATO and the anger of America to the European elites, this is a perfect example. We're engaged in an economic war with the Chinese Communist Party, an economic war that the elites in Europe and the elites in the United Kingdom have made as much money as the elites in the United States to the detriment of their people. And look in Germany, where they essentially, the German elites walked away from all those little middle industries that was the backbone of German precision engineering, walked away and let the Chinese take all the intellectual property, and now almost all that's made in China. They have fucked the German people, okay, in the deindustrialization of Germany. And they sit there and have the gall to say, oh, we're not going to decouple. Tell her to go fuck herself, okay? Yeah. I've been one of the biggest voices, having been a former naval officer in a carrier battle group in that part of the world, to say we have to bring a carrier battle group home, and the Europeans have got to start taking their weight.
China is a collective action problem in that sense.
But it's not a collective action problem. That's the problem. The European Union is not with us on this. You're going to see they're going to try to weasel into a deal. The elites in Europe are totally bought off. Everybody that reads the paper, you understand, you think you're dealing with honest brokers? The party at Davos is, okay, Geneva, which is really the engine room of the United Nations. That's where World Health is. What you see in the United Nations in New York is all theater. That's performance art. The work of the United Nations is in Geneva. The work of the globalists, or that conference, is in Davos, okay? Both in Switzerland. They are lock, stock, and barrel owned by the Chinese Communist Party. 80% of the managers and influencers in the big working operations, right, in Geneva are CCP or CCP operatives, right? This is why we've decided to cut all the money out of there. Davos is the same way. Davos go back to the third week of January in 2017. Okay, we're going to go back in time. In that week, there were two historic speeches given. On Wednesday, there was a speech given in Davos by a guy named President Xi. It's the only time he's ever been there to address the audience. He talked about the strategy of 2019. He talked about the network. He talked about essentially the end of the Westphalian system, the end of the nation state, that the future is going to be a series of networks. It was really one belt, one road. They would connect markets. They would control resources to component manufacturers, to market, to final manufacturing in China, then back out. The world would live in peace on the new Chinese model. And that Chinese model was called a network. The network, was a network effect. President and knowing, because what is Davos? Davos is a collection of hedge fund managers and investment bankers and private equity and media and marketing companies and Booz Allen and McKinsey and every accounting firm and law firm. They're all in the same business. What's that business? The information business. They're all in the information business. This is the insiders. They all knew about the Uyghurs. They all knew about the Catholic Church being suppressed. They all knew about the evangelical Christians being tortured. They all knew about Falun Gong. They all knew about organ harvesting. Everything of the brutal dictatorship of the Chinese Communist Party is known by every fucker in this room. Okay? It's not private knowledge. And these are the best and the smartest people in the world. They gave that evil fuck a standing ovation. Right? He was Davos man. That is the program that Davos wanted. That's what Klaus Schwab wanted, the end of the nation state. 48 hours later in Washington, D.C., in that building that's about 500 yards from us, the Capitol, on the west side, President Trump stood up and gave the American carnage, gave his first inaugural address. He says, this stops here and now. And that was a throwdown to Xi. And I am so glad I was a tiny part of that. Yeah. That is the differentiation that we've had from that time. And you're either on their side or you're on the side of the populist nationalist movement throughout the world. And you can't be, there's no middle ground here. There's no middle ground.
Look, taking all of that in, you described what I think other people call it is the paper tiger of the Chinese economy, the whole system in
well, they're
China.
a paper tiger, but they're a mass. We've turned them into a vast military power right now.
So with all of that in mind, and in my opinion, the unlikely possibility that they would even want to restructure their whole system, let alone able to restructure their whole system, surely then kinetic war is actually a serious possibility.
Kinetic war is with the Chinese Communist Party, particularly around Taiwan and the chip facilities, is definitely not a zero probability. I would agree with you.
And would you want America involved in?
No, I don't want America having coming out of the Navy, and I was part of the 7th Fleet. My first tour was all Straits of Taiwan and South China Sea and patrolling off of China in the East China Sea. No, I'm the last person like President Trump. I don't want any kinetic war at all. That's why I think if we, you got to remember right now, we're taking public in this country with American pension funds. The mothers and fathers of the kids on those carrier battle groups, particularly in the 7th Fleet, that in all probability or not probability, possibility could be at the bottom of the Straits of Taiwan or the South China Sea with the overwhelming military, weaponry that the Chinese bring so close because they're only 90 miles away in Taiwan. You could lose 10,000 sailors in 2 hours. It could be as bloody as any naval battle we've had in World War II. Coral Sea, Leyte Gulf, Midway, you pick it. Right? This could be the bloodiest battle in naval history. You could lose 10 or 12,000 American sailors in a couple hours. The mothers and fathers of those sailors, their pension funds right now are going through Wall Street, the Larry Finks of the world. We're underwriting the Chinese military technology companies. That's an open secret. It's not, you don't see that on mainstream media. Remember, without the City of London, and without Wall Street and without the elites in the United Kingdom and in the United States being partners of these people and financing them and particularly giving them to the technology, they either steal or they force us to give them $600 billion a year in intellectual property. Part of the deal, if you want to have any access to the Chinese market, you must do a joint venture. Part of the joint venture, you must dump all your intellectual property in there. Corporate CEOs say, we can't complain about it. If we complain about it, we're going to be cut out. And no other American or British companies complain about it, so we just go along with it. The system is completely rigged by the elites to make as much money as they possibly can funding our enemy. Okay? This is what has to stop. If you stopped it, if we cut them off from all capital, and I mean equity capital and loans, if you cut them off from all technology, they would collapse in 100 days.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Winston Marshall Show. You can click here to watch the full episode. And for more clips like this one, don't forget to subscribe. And as always, be well.